And welcome back, rugby fans, to Rugby411. As always, I'm your host. My name is Joshua Shibata, and it is with great pleasure to introduce a very special guest here to the Rugby411. We can go into a long list of his career, but I gotta say right now, I believe when it comes to the essence and trying to establish a footmark for rugby in the United States, I don't think you can find any guy who is a bigger spokesman for that than this man right here, a capped Eagles player himself, former MLR player, had a huge career in Europe as well. Introducing to you a great gentleman, Will Hooley. Will, welcome to Rugby 411. How you doing, brother?
I'm very well, man. It's great to see you again. And as introductions go, that is, I'm blushing. I really am. That's as good as they get. I'm not sure I probably am going to live up to all that expectation, but nonetheless, love what you do, Josh, for the game, and all people like yourself, proper fans who are very, positive, bring positive energy to rugby here in the States, and we need that. So
Yeah.
looking forward to talking it all out with you.
There you go. There you go. And again, we're going to be dealing with a lot of international issues, competition specifically. Of course, we don't have the time to go over everything, but a lot of it is specifically focused on what USA Rugby is doing. And Will, I know 2025 is ending in just a couple of weeks, but man, we have a huge 2026. And of course, a huge 2027 when it comes not only to rugby in the world, but rugby for the United States as well. So, first topic I want to talk to you about, we just had it done earlier this month, the draw for the
Yeah.
Rugby World Cup 2027, which will take place in Sydney, Australia. And again, we can't go over all of the teams and all of the pools, but I'm going to bring up our pool, and here it comes right now. All the pools are here, but specifically, Will, we're obviously going to focus on Pool E, which has the United States in there, France, Japan, Samoa joining the United States. First time for Rugby World Cup. For those who don't know, first time that we've expanded the Rugby World Cup men's to 24 teams. So a pool of four in this one. And Will, I forgot to gloss over, you're no stranger to the Rugby World Cup. You've played in a Rugby World Cup yourself, which we'll come back to in a bit for that one. But Will, what are your thoughts when you're looking at Pool E, France, Japan, and Samoa? What are your thoughts on that pool for our USA Eagles?
It's tough. I
Mm,
mean, that's putting it really bluntly and simply, isn't it? It is difficult, having a team like France who obviously have been a powerhouse in the game for so long, but even particular, I would say in the last sort of decade or so, have
mm,
really, maybe even less than that, have really sort of upped it, being one of the top tier one teams. Of course, the likes of an Antoine Dupont being
right.
one of, if not the best player in a generation. Exciting to see the US go up against him and go up against France. And then Japan and Samoa, two teams that we know very well. The Pacific
Mm-hmm.
Nations Cup, of course, happening
Mm-hmm.
earlier here in 2025. They'll be a bit more sort of, understanding, or the US will understand how they go about their business. Japan, a very fast attack. Eddie Jones being their head coach, of course, who, love him or hate him, Eddie Jones.
Right.
He's a very
Right.
successful coach in his
Yeah.
in his own right. And
Mm-hmm.
Japan, of course, being, I always look at Japan, Josh, as being the team that probably the US strides to be like. And I
Ah,
don't necessarily mean that in terms of the way they play, but just you look at Japan and the World Cups before their own World Cup, 2015, obviously they beat the Springboks, and then
mm-hmm.
they had their own World Cup in 2019, getting to the
Right.
quarterfinals, and
Mm-hmm.
how just domestically that whole sport really took off. I mean, that's kind of what we aim to have here in the US. And then Samoa. Samoa, obviously, the US beat to get into the World Cup, that
Right.
infamous win
Right.
earlier in September, I believe, in Denver. 29 points to 13 in the end. And look, that was just the moment that the US needed. But Samoa then later qualified through the repechage tournament in Dubai. So Samoa, the Eagles have good memories of, but I would also say it's going to be probably a different team to the one that the
Oh,
Eagles
sure.
played this
Mm-hmm.
year. I think in 2 years' time, you'll have more of those players who play in France or overseas will be available. They're not always available in the windows for whatever reason. Plus, also, you're hearing rumors of certain international players of old in other international teams. I'm looking at the like someone like Manu Tuolangi, former
Mm,
England player. He might make himself available for Samoa as it
yeah,
works.
I've heard of that too. I've heard
Yeah,
that too.
works within the sort of the times between playing last for England and then his heritage being Samoa. And anyway,
Hmm. Hmm.
so it's difficult. I'm not going to lie. But you look at all those pools and you think for all the tier two nations, it's challenging. I mean, Canada as well in that pool C,
Yeah.
and even quality teams like Uruguay, Ireland, Scotland in the same pool, as well
Hmm.
as Portugal, who did so well at that previous World Cup. So it makes it exciting. And I think the last thing to say about this, Josh, as well, is the exciting element is that number one, number two go through to round of 16, but also
Right.
the four best third places. And I think that's where US fans and certainly Canadian fans and Chile fans,
Hmm.
Uruguay
Hmm.
fans, you name it here in the Americas, will naturally get excited that their opportunity to get through to knockout rugby at a World Cup becomes a little bit more favorable now. And that is a massive carrot to go after.
Right, and you bring up something that I was going to mention as well, Will, that possibility that, yes, I mean, I think you said it great when you started off saying, I love to bring a lot of positivity to rugby,
Yep.
especially United States rugby. And, me being a very positive person, I'm looking at the pool. We know Samoa. Granted, it might be a completely different Samoan team. And we know Japan. And I think your description of USA being that Japanese team, that next tier two team that, man, you never know. There
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
is a chance that they can win because that's what Japan prides themselves, the Brave Blossoms. You mentioned that the win in Brighton, that's the game that actually got me into rugby as a whole
Amazing.
because
Yeah.
my heritage is Japanese. And when I heard
Of
about
course.
that, saw the game, the emotions, oh man, brought me to tears. And man,
Yeah. Yeah.
that really got me into rugby. And I mean, I'm not saying that could happen here, but hey, a win over France would be just as big. But I'm looking more at, yes, possibly that third place. There's a very good chance that USA could be one of those two teams. I believe it's two teams that can make it in as a best third place. You
Yeah.
know,
Yep.
so I like the chances for that. But like you said, it will be a struggle. There is some top-notch quality, and I feel, and you know this, and we'll talk about this in just a moment, Will, with your experience. But I feel when it comes to Rugby World Cup play, it brings out a whole new level of play from teams than your traditional international test matches and your local, even Six Nations big tournaments like that. I think the Rugby World Cup brings out even more of a standard from everybody. So you're bringing your A game, your A plus game. So the teams that USA will be playing, like Samoa or Japan, will not be the same that they've probably seen the last couple of times that they faced each other. Funny instance with this one too, for those who don't know, I'm sorry, France, Samoa, and the United States were all in the same pool in 2015, along with South Africa and Scotland. So USA kind of familiar with certain teams within this pool on that big stage of the Rugby World Cup. And then talking about your experience, Will, you played in the 2019 Rugby World Cup when it was in Japan. Unfortunately, weren't able to go against France in that cup. The USA was played against France in the pool stage, but you were able to play a couple of games there. What was your experience like, Will, representing the United States on the biggest stage in rugby, playing in a Rugby World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I was gutted not to play against France. I unfortunately picked up a concussion in the England game the week
Ah,
before in something like the 78th minute, and then and
ah,
then we and then we had a quick turnaround and played France the following week. And the boys had a really it was the boys lost 33 points to 9 against France, but
mhm,
really we were all the way there up until about 68 minutes. And
mm,
but look, I mean, look, the World Cup, in answer to your question, Josh, it is
sure.
just the absolute pinnacle of any rugby player's career. It is, I think, particularly the one in Japan. I'm so honoured and privileged to have played in. It meant an incredible lot to myself, my family. When you're involved in that circus, as I like to call it, because going to Japan, first time I've been to Japan, and
Mm,
we were in Kobe, Fukuoka, Tokyo, you name
right.
it, like all these amazing places but you're not really there for the history tours and the
Hmm.
museums
Hmm.
and what I would love to. You're there, you're there to do a job, but you're just surrounded by rugby. Just took over this country from the
Hmm.
downtowns to the fan villages. I'll never forget. Japan actually were playing against Samoa. They would previously had been in each other's pool in 2019, and we were in Kumagaya. And we were just around it during the week. You know, we were playing, I think, the Argentinians at the weekend. And we went to the fan village just to try and have a watch of this game between Japan and Samoa. And I'm not necessarily they knew exactly who I was or the other players I was with, but we went as a group of six. And I'm not joking, went into this fan village. It was like a pack of sardines all in one. There was like not a space, and they flocked us. They knew that we were the USA. They knew we were in
Sure.
Kumagaya, ready for the game coming up against Argentina.
Mm.
And even though the game was going on, you name it, I've never felt more like a celebrity in my
Nice.
life. And anyway, the point it's literally just rugby is the theme, and it's something which I hopefully Australia will build into for 2027. It will all be about rugby, and then of course in 2031 being in the USA. I mean, that's the thing
Right.
which obviously gets me really excited. So that's what I
Same
would say
here.
my fond memories of the World Cup is just the aura of the tournament. Being
Hmm.
involved in that was incredible. And the other thing that I'll mention as well is I mentioned I missed out in the France game because of injury, but then played against Argentina and Tonga on the 3rd of February next year is when the schedule comes out, the announcement of venues, the announcement
Hmm.
of dates. And that's going to be interesting as well because the reality is we had a really tough pool draw, but we also had a really tough schedule. I remember
Ah.
the Argentina to Tonga game was something like a 4-day turnaround, which I
Oh.
actually think now the legislations are in place that won't be allowed again.
Sure.
But
Sure.
at the same time, that does make a difference. You know, when USA play against Japan, what's then the sort of margin of days rest before they
Hmm.
maybe go and play Samoa? And
Right.
the reality for Scott Lawrence and his staff is they've got to think about how they're going to tackle this group because the
Hmm.
obvious thing is Japan and Samoa are the big games.
Right.
As much as France is obviously an incredible chance to maybe go and get it, a reminder, you come second, you qualify. You come one of out of four of the best third places out of the pools, you qualify to round of 16. If the
Right.
US qualify for the round of 16 in 2027, Josh, that would be outstanding. Like, I'm not
True.
joking. Like, even though there are more teams, blah, 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 that would be an incredibly impressive result for the US.
Hmm.
It's something they
Hmm.
can do. Unfortunately, it's going to be really hard.
Right. But there is a chance.
You're telling me there's
That
a chance.
there's a
Yes, I am.
chance. There
Yeah.
is a chance. So
Yeah.
yeah. No, again, I think that's awesome with your experience of the Rugby World Cup. It just you talking about that gives me goosebumps. And like you said, 2027 is Australia, but then 2031, that's the big one for us USA fans, because we bring that to the United States and hopefully that same atmosphere. And obviously, Will, the hope is just like with the World Cup for soccer way back in the 90s here in the United States when it just caught on when all of a sudden America realized there's this game called soccer that's pretty popular.
Yeah.
Hopefully the same thing happens with us in 2031 where people start to realize, hey, there's this game called rugby and it's pretty damn popular.
Oh
And
man.
let's start to make something of this,
We've got
So
to. We've got to. And I think the other thing just to mention as well is knowing that, and we'll come on to it, Major League Rugby, we are, unlike soccer in the US, we're trying to build the platform
mhm.
pre the tournament to
Right.
then, be the catalyst that once 2031 is over,
Mhm.
the legacy lives on. It's not just this one-off tournament. And
Right.
obviously, Major League Rugby born in 2018 and yes
Mhm.
going through its ups and downs, but hopefully that will be a building block. But then equally as well, the US has to have this building phase to
Mhm.
achieve and have success at the 2031 World Cup. Maybe we'll come on to a little bit what that looks like. It starts in 2027, and that's something
Mhm.
Scott Lawrence has made very public, is that the performance at 2027 needs to be in a way of improvement or showing that we can try and get to the knockout stages, because 2031 we need to deliver.
Oh, definitely, for sure. Because again, as much as America is all about, oh, okay, this is cool, You know as well as I do, Will, Americans love winners.
Amen.
So we need to win. We need to have
Amen.
a good performance. But speaking of, you talk about the build up and the establishment, like you said, with head coach Scott Lawrence, building everything up to the eventual 2031 focuses on 2027. But another thing that's going to help build us up in 2026 is now the World Rugby Nations Cup, which will, again, like I said, we have a big year ahead of us when it comes to rugby. An exciting year. Though I know, and we'll talk about this, there's a little bit of controversy around this World Rugby Nations Cup. But before we talk about that, let's explain what that is. So, again, there is the World Rugby Nations Championship, which is a tier one competition between 12 of the top teams in the world. You're arguably tier one nations, and my viewers of the YouTube channel know the difference between the tier one and the unofficial tier two nations. The tier one is more in the World Rugby Nations Championship tournament. We're focusing, of course, because USA is in the Nations Cup, which again, we are involved with 11 other nations, technically of the tier two brand, but it is going to be technically a year-long competition, two stages, one taking place in the July test window, one taking place in the November test window. We're playing against six teams in the other side of our pool. We're in a pool with Canada, Uruguay, Chile, Tonga, and Samoa. We'll be playing against Portugal, Zimbabwe, Spain in July, Hong Kong, Romania, and Georgia in November. Will, for the July contest, what's exciting is that those three games will be here in the United States. An opportunity again for USA fans to see some exciting rugby. Also, an opportunity. I look at that July 11th game, Zimbabwe. USA's never played Zimbabwe in the history of our rugby nation, so that's an exciting team to see play somewhere in America. And of course, Portugal and Spain. We've been having quite a bit of a rivalry with Spain. Portugal is another one, a big rivalry when it comes to qualifications for the Rugby World Cup back in 2024. I'm sorry, in 23. So a lot of history there. But Will, looking at the schedule, July and November, what sticks out to you for USA?
Well, I mean, it's an exciting prospect. The tournament, I think, at least, I've always had an issue sometimes with, and I played in many November tests and summer tests, is as much as world rankings and test matches, and they mean a lot and whatever it might be, like, what are you ultimately playing for? I think there
Mm,
is definitely this sense World Rugby are trying to create meaningful competitive games in these windows and also trying to make sure that the level playing field, particularly of the tier two nations, and then you could equally say the tier one nations, are going up against each other as much as possible. It's
right.
interesting that the Nations Cup, as you mentioned, this kind of tier two tournament, it's split into basically two regions. You've got the Americas side of things and the Pacific, and then you've also got the sort of Europe and Africa. And it's like, as you can see there, USA are actually not going to play against Canada, and Canada are not going to play against USA. We're going to kind of
Right.
switch over. And, you know, I think maybe the first time this happens in 2026, it will be a bit of trial and error.
Sure.
And it's good to obviously see the kind of, you know, those teams in Europe and Africa get to play them in both home and away fixtures. I do think that's useful. And then the winner, though, of the Nations Cup is going to be purely down on points on how well everyone scored against kind of each other.
Hmm.
So there's an element of being a little bit complicated, and I wonder after 2026, it's meant to be happening every other year, whether it will be something that changes in 2028 a little bit, in 2030, which they've actually said in 2030 the aim is to have promotion and relegation. So if you win the Nations Cup, you go into the Nations Championship. You lose the Nations Championship, you go into the Nations Cup. We
Which
shall see.
that aspect, Will, sorry to interrupt you. That aspect is, and we'll talk about where there is some controversy about this tournament being in existence to begin with. I like the fact that there is a chance that a team or a couple of teams can move from the tier two competition, the cup, to the tier one competition, which if you're familiar with rugby, you have the big competitions like the Six Nations and the Rugby Championship, which I know a lot of people for years have been kind of arguing whether or not there should be some sort of regulation and delegation in those. That's never happened so far. You have added a couple teams to the Six Nations Championship, but there's never been the opportunity for Tier 2 to compete with these Tier 1 teams. And ultimately, Will, I feel when you talk about these games, and I'm talking about building up specifically for the USA, is to give the USA boys a chance to face against teams of equal or better caliber, right? So the opportunity in the future to possibly make it into that tier one championship, to be able to play for sure in 1 year, possibly in England, possibly a France or Scotland, South Africa, New Zealand, in a meaningful competition. I think that experience is valuable for any tier two team, right?
Yeah, look, it is. It's incredibly valuable, and I think this is the controversy about the tournament
Hmm.
is this going to put a gap between the tier two nations who are playing against each other and then the tier one nations are playing against each other. The one thing that
Hmm.
I would say from my personal experience when I was with the Eagles, and I was probably blessed that during my Eagles career, a good chunk of it was actually when we were pretty strong. We were 12th in the world. We were beating Samoa regularly. We were beating the South American teams, beating Canada. We were beating Scotland, and we had those chances against Scotland, against Ireland. I remember particularly in the year 2018. And the reality is, and I remember speaking to Jason Darm about this a little bit, is the recent Scotland game for the US was a bit of a disaster. There's not getting around it. That
Yeah.
wasn't enough preparation, went into
Mm.
it and was completely blown out the water, whatever you might be. But there's this fine line between making sure that you're getting the regular tier two games against each other, because that is going to breed, development and good quality games that are really
Mm.
genuinely meaningful. Meanwhile, a game and losing 85-0 in Scotland, is that really that meaningful for either team? The answer is probably not. But
Mm.
you need to be able to at least have some sort of testing of the water against these higher ranked teams, because it's more like, where do you stand and what do you need to get
Right.
better, and you realize there's certain things you can't get away with and things
Hmm.
like that. I am not just saying this from a US perspective. I'm also saying this from the other nations that are involved in this Nations Cup, and in particular the name there on the 21st of November against Georgia. I think a team like Georgia probably feel a little bit hard done by. I mean, look, you look like currently Wales in world rankings are very much struggling. If Georgia play
Mm.
Wales tomorrow, what's that sort of game? Japan were only just beaten by Wales in the last kick of the game. So there's sort of there's a little bit of they've had to split the line as to where it fits between cup
Right.
and championship. I get that. Um, I think there's just still a lot of things to be sorted out. Are we really waiting until 2030 to see if there's promotion and relegation? I don't know. We shall maybe find out more come after year one of this tournament, and then of course after the World Cup in 2027.
Sure, sure. Now, let's go over real quick with also a part of the controversy with this, and I wanted to pick your brain on this, Will. The argument is you see a competition like this, granted, not everybody's playing everybody, but it seems very eerily like a World Cup, right? And so there's a lot of people that are arguing, well, if we have this thing called the Nations Championship and the Nations Cup, does that take away the speciality of the World Cup? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think it does. I think in all honesty, like, the reality is for the Nations Championship, for example, there's not lots of complete difference. In the summer or the sort of July window, the Northern Hemisphere teams go and play the Southern Hemisphere teams. It'd be
Hmm.
England who tour South Africa, or Ireland tour New Zealand, and then it's the
Hmm.
reverse. It's we've
Right.
just seen recently in the fall in
Hmm.
November the European teams hosting the sort of Southern Hemisphere teams. So I don't really think, and now, as I say, there's more meaning to those games. It's like there is a genuine competition on the line, and I think in the championship, it all comes to the conclusion of actually at Allianz Stadium in London, it's going to be
Hmm.
the top whoever comes one against number two, or however they're doing the playoff system. So I really don't. I think you can't. The World Cup's so magic. It's this one-off tournament every 4 years where you're in one location. It's everyone against everyone. It's done in this, round robin style tournament. For me, I don't. I'm not necessarily too bothered about that side of things. As I look at it, sort of at face value.
Hmm. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, Will. And I also go back to a big argument, and you've mentioned this before. The benefit of this is that it allows more rugby. It allows teams like the United States, which you and I both know, and not making that as an excuse, but the lack of time that the Eagles team members get to play and train with each other is so limited, especially if you don't get to play all the time.
Yeah.
But now that we have added to the docket this Nations Cup games, on top of possibly we're still doing the Pacific Nations Cup, it's just more games and more chances for the USA Eagles to play at a consistent basis and to then build that connection that head coach Scott Lawrence is talking about. And if we're doing that every year, it just makes the team stronger and stronger as we go. So I feel maybe, again, I'm looking at this through the viewpoint of a tier 2 fan, not a tier 1 fan, but I'm looking at it as a tier 2 fan. Like, this is great. This is amazing. So it allows not only our boys to play more, but then also selfishly as a fan, more rugby is great for me because it gets more rugby to watch.
Yeah, look,
Yeah.
I think so. I think, like at the end of the day, the fixtures that you got in front of us here for next year is there's not actually too much difference of being before, just in terms of
Mm-hmm.
number of fixtures, but particularly if the PNC is still going ahead, which as you mentioned is by all accounts happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's just still like, one of the great things has always been in the July window. We've had recently England arrive in DC. The year before that was Scotland, and it really sort of built that audience to come to the table, and especially leading up towards the World Cup, those kind of games to an American audience for the American fans watching their American team, regardless of whether they're not as good as England. It's still important to growing the game and growing,
Right.
seeing full stadiums. At the end of the day, I'm just being honest. I think selection of venue is going to be really important. If you go and
Yeah.
put the July 11th game against Zimbabwe in some big MLS NFL style stadium, I don't think it's going to be filled out. And then I don't know whether that's a great thing for the sort of marketing of the sport. So there's fine lines here. I think there might still be windows for those opportunities to play tier one nations, even if it is in the same year as Nations Cup. I also truly believe, is there a window, particularly in the early part of the year? It might be pre MLR where the America's Rugby Championship could come back, because that is a tournament which I
Oh,
played in and I loved. And I thought,
sure.
actually, when you think about it, Canada, USA, Uruguay, Chile,
Mm-hmm.
Brazil,
Those
even
South American.
those
Yeah.
South American teams, like that is also a strong tournament. So you throw that in the mix potentially in sort of January and February, then yeah, I just wonder whether that could be the case, and then kick on after that into Major League Rugby. But look, we're blessed, I guess, to be at least talking about rugby coming up, and so we
That's
should be
very
positive
true.
about that.
Very true. And now, perfect segue. Let's talk a little bit about more rugby, more specifically what you're going to be doing, talking about rugby. And this is only a couple months away. The announcement was done a couple weeks earlier from today's date, but Sunday Night Rugby coming to ESPN. Of course, that is in correlation with Major League Rugby's 2026 season. Granted, Sunday Night Rugby doesn't actually kick off until week 3, and I'll bring up the docket here of what we'll see each of those games. Week 3, April 12th, we'll have of really what should be an exciting game. The Chicago Hounds hosting the newly formed California Legion. But then you'll have a game pretty much every week, every Sunday
Yeah.
on Sunday Night Rugby on ESPN, hosted, I believe, hosted by Will Hooley, correct? Tell me more
Yes.
about Sunday Night Rugby, Will.
Yeah, I mean, look, Josh, it was the first sort of soft announcement was made. I know after some negative news coming out of
Hmm.
Major League Rugby, and I think amongst some of the internal leadership with MLR, it was kind of like enough of the negative news. Let's actually just push something out that's going to be happening and is exciting a new product for 2026. This has been something which personally, and I know with a couple of others as well, really wanted to bring to the table. It's been always my thing around how we can actually showcase on a broadcast level the best version of ourselves. I think obviously, broadcast has come on a long, long way from the early days of 2018 when the MLR was first arrived, and then of course to where we are now, and some great people behind it and the development there. Albeit we all know it needs to get better, and
Mm,
that's for everything and everyone. That's for myself learning. That's for whoever's being in charge with whatever it might be, graphics to the timings. And I think with just 6 teams, Josh, although it
mm,
seems obviously a negative from the fact we've come from 11 to 6,
right.
we're realizing now that actually we have a really good opportunity to really nail down what we want because there's less teams, it's less sort of voices at the table. It's kind of like what's going to be the best for the going forward. And therefore, having prominent every week at the exact same time, basically having the Sunday Night Rugby, and then equally as well the other 2 games fitting over the weekend. You're
Mm,
having this style of we want to try and build that kind of inside the NBA type feel where we're breaking the game and elevating the game of that Sunday night, but also after the game you've got the opportunity to go through what's already happened that weekend, what's the analysis been, and also most important, and I say most importantly because it's got to bring entertainment. This is going to be something for
right.
the rugby fan, and trust me, I know what rugby fans are looking for. They don't want to be patronized. They want to be spoken
Sure.
to properly, and that
Hmm.
analysis and stuff will be there. But equally as well, there'll be non-rugby friendly style content in there, whether it be education, whether it be fun. And I say this where yes, I'm really helping create this thing, this co-founding of this thing, whatever you want to call it, and then also hosting. It's certainly something personally which I really take seriously and know that there's a pressure on me to deliver, and I can't wait for that if I'm honest, because I really want the MLR fans to have a product that they're proud of, and
Yep.
I honestly believe that not all MLR fans maybe feel that way. So we've got a lot of expectations to try and meet, and we don't have big NFL budgets, we don't have big massive other budgets, whatever you want to call it, but we're really going to try and bring something new pre-game, at halftime of the Sunday Night Rugby, and then also post-game. It is
Nice.
not just going to be me. You are right. There's a lot of developments and planning that are happening at the moment. Some early conversations, some really exciting conversations with some individuals who might also be coming on board. And then equally, trying to use people as well who fans will also associate with and know. I'm really honestly, I'm an open book about it. Like I can tell you now, I've already written a run of show, which is a mock draft. I've
Mm,
already done stuff for concepts and speaking to a lot of people across various parts of the industry. And I'm not just talking rugby, you name it, whether it's in other areas from NASCAR to lacrosse to whatever, and seeing what maybe works. And the reality is it's not going to be reinventing the wheel. It's going to hopefully
right.
be high quality that matches both for the rugby fan and the non-rugby fan, which is going to elevate that game and then elevate ultimately, I hope, our product of Major League Rugby. We're going to be bold, and it may not be perfect, but bear with us. It's for the right reasons.
Oh yeah, no. And again, I think to be honest, I think the point, even though, like you said, the announcement itself came from a point where there was a lot of negativity on where is Major League Rugby heading. We're losing teams left and
Yeah, yeah,
right,
yeah, sure.
you know. So I think, to be honest, Will, this is the perfect time for this to happen, right? Yeah, your goal is we just need to go up, you know. So
Yep.
why not bring out something fresh? Not necessarily like you said, inventing the wheel, reinventing the wheel, but definitely bringing something that, arguably Major League Rugby, or at least our rugby game, hasn't really had, that can attract both the old fans, like you said, the fans that don't want to be patronized, the fans that are expecting to see the stats, the analysis, things that if you watch a Six Nations, if you watch Premiership, if you watch the URC, you'll see them talk about those things, see it here. And then, like you said, stuff that the casual fans will gravitate to, like you would see on the Sunday Night Football, or
Yeah.
a weekly Major League Baseball program. So I
Oh
think
man.
I think this is the perfect time to do that.
And look,
Um,
we need obviously what I would ask is for all those Major League Rugby fans is, regardless whether you like me or not, and I'm sure, don't you worry, there'll be plenty out there who don't necessarily like me, but just be more like get behind it, and that's
Yeah.
what I would say. It's kind of we're at the point now where things are going ahead. The page has been turned. These new things are coming about, whether it's from new product, new initiatives, new leadership, new schedule. We've even got a new team, and
Yeah.
I've got a good feeling as well that 2027 there even will be some further new things. Yeah, really excited by some of the conversations happening at the moment. It's still very early days. Stay tuned, but ultimately this is something which I do think is going to elevate the product. And that for me is my job, and I will take it very seriously. I trust me, I take it very, very seriously to put all I can into it to make it the best it can be.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Honestly, Will, I don't think, like I mentioned at the very beginning, I don't think they could have found a better person to
Oh, I
spearhead
don't know.
this than you.
Luckily, you won't. It won't just be my dulcet tones. That's why I can assure all people. You the real plan is to have some really exciting people involved, and also really some fan favorites as well.
Sure, sure. Well, anyways, I am excited. I can tell you again, I am a huge positive rugby fan here in the United States, but I'm definitely supporting this. Can't wait to see the first episode, Sunday Night Rugby. Again, week 3, we're kicking off April 12th.
Yeah,
Again, really exciting game. Chicago Hounds hosting the California Legion. A lot of exciting weeks of action following that. Again, schedules there. Again, you can always go to Major League Rugby and their social media. They'll have the schedule up there. Will, if anyone were to want to follow you, and I don't know why they wouldn't want to, what would be the best social media to follow you?
no, follow me across the big platforms, isn't it? From Twitter or X as it's known, Will
Mm.
underscore Hooley, and then Instagram, which is W Hooley, Wooly. And sometimes I think some people think my surname is, but no, that's just because unfortunately I don't think I could get Will underscore Hooley back in the day as a username. But yeah, look, keep an eye on that, and of course keep an eye on USMLR. As I say, I'm really ending the year incredibly optimistic and excited by some of those conversations, and then equally the conversations that are going to begin again in the early part of next year, ready to then put us in a good position for that first one in week 3, Chicago versus California in Sunday Night Rugby.
Awesome, awesome. Well, again, Will, I do appreciate your time. We went over a lot of great stuff. I'm hoping, I mean, you're obviously going to be super, super busy now that we're getting closer to the kickoff of Major League Rugby. And then, of course, with your show, maybe somewhere in the future, I'll be able to get you back on. We
For
can talk
sure.
about, maybe the aftermath of Major League Rugby season, talk about what's going on with the USA Eagles, of course. Would love to be able to talk to you as we get closer to the World Cup, and
Yeah.
get your analysis on a lot of things, and especially with your experience playing in a World Cup, what your thoughts are and how the Eagles are shaping for that. But again, honestly, Will, I think for the big picture is there's a lot of great things coming up for USA Rugby fans, USA Eagles fans in general. So I'm super, super excited like you are for what's coming up in the next couple of years for rugby here in the United States. So again, Will, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us. We're wrapping up here at Rugby411. Thank you very much, all you fans, for joining us here on the YouTube channel. Show your support and likes as much as you can. And as always, thank you very much, and we'll see you on the pitch.